In August 1940, a pamphlet began appearing around Paris. It offered Parisians ways to deal with the Germans without giving them too much. Most importantly, display total indifference, but privately nurture your anger. It will serve you well. Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. Lee here with a big glass of Gatorade because I'm suffering from a cold. And welcome to an episode of Women in War, in which I will talk about Matthew Goodman's book, Paris Undercover, a wartime story of courage, friendship, and betrayal. I have the cover off because I was making notes about the book and my thoughts on this. Originally, my boss told me about this book, Paris Undercover, and as soon as I read about it, I ran right out online, and bought a copy of Paris Underground, which is what Paris Undercover is about, sort of. So originally I was going to read Paris Underground first, but then I listened to a couple of podcasts with Matthew Goodman, the author of Paris Undercover, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to read this one first, and I am so glad I did. In those podcasts, Goodman talks about an oh shit moment because he thought he was going to write the history of Paris Underground, but then he found out, and this is not a secret, that some liberties have been taken with the truth. Before I go any further, let me tell you what this is about. Etta Schreiber and Kate Boniface are the unlikeliest of heroines, two seemingly ordinary women, an American widow and an English divorcee, living quietly together in Paris. Yet during the Nazi occupation, these two friends find themselves unexpectedly plunged into the whirlwind of history. With the help of a French country priest and others, they set out to rescue British and French soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, some of whom they daringly smuggle through Nazi checkpoints hidden inside the trunk of their car. The trunk, in this case, is not what we think of as a trunk. It's a trunk. It is underneath the back seat, so it's not like you pop the trunk and there somebody is. You have to do a little bit more work to get to it. Ultimately, the Gestapo captures them both. After 18 months in prison, Etta is returned to the United States in a prisoner exchange. Back home, hoping to bring attention to her friend Kate's bravery, she publishes a memoir about their work. Paris Underground becomes a publishing sensation, and Etta a celebrity. Meanwhile, Kate spends the rest of the war in a Nazi prison, entirely unaware of the book that has been written about her and the deeds that have been claimed in her name. In researching this story, Matthew Goodman uncovered military records and personal testimonies that reveal, for the first time, the shocking truth behind Etta's memoir and the unexpected, far-reaching consequences of its publication. More than just a story of two women's remarkable courage, Paris Undercover is a vivid, gripping account of deceit, betrayal, and personal redemption. Okay, so, kind of like Goodman, I went into Paris Undercover thinking I was going to get a different story than I got. The story that I got was not the story I expected. What I thought was that I was going to read a story, regardless of the book Paris Underground, of a 62-year-old grandmotherly type, although she had no kids, who was a heroine, who actively participated in the resistance. And while she did participate, what I found was that Etta Schreiber was really more of a follower, and that's important later on. In fact, Kate was the driving force behind their efforts in the resistance, and if it were not for Kate, Etta probably would not have been involved at all. What's remarkable is that this is early days, just after the Nazis have occupied Paris, and Kate, alone, with the help of others, but on her own initiative, establishes an escape line, and she and Etta did help airmen escape, just not as many as Paris Underground says that they do, and that's going to be really important later. It's still significant. I think they say that there's no definitive account of the number of men that they rescued, but Kate testified between 15 and 20-ish. But that's still significant because their line was only in existence for 3 months. Kate was captured on November 30th. Etta, before that, was captured. So, as the blurb says, Etta is exchanged in a prisoner swap after America entered the war. Meanwhile, Kate was held prisoner until she was liberated. The camp was liberated by the Soviets. And I say liberated with air quotes because the Soviets ran the Nazis out of the camp that she was in and then raped all the women repeatedly. So prior to this, after their capture, Kate and Etta do see each other at trial, and I think in another prison. Etta is given so many years in prison. This is all, during the trial. And Kate, and this is significant, is the first woman in Paris to be condemned to death by the Nazis. So, they're in prison. Etta goes home. She gets involved with a guy I will refer to as Weasley McWeaselface, because this was one of the surprising things to me that I found in Paris Undercover, is how the book came to be written. And I'm not going to spoil any more than the author revealed in the podcast I listened to, but McWeaselface was the driving force behind getting this book published, and the deceit, in my opinion, that's mentioned in the blurb is from Weasley. He deceives Etta somewhat, and he certainly deceives someone else involved in the writing of this book. So, Etta's home. This book is published. It's a Book of the Month Club pick. It is made into a film. I found the film, I think, on YouTube, but I have not watched it. The film takes liberties, but the book also takes liberties with the facts. And it's also produced in, one of the British newspapers publishes excerpts of it, so the Nazis definitely know about this book. Meanwhile, Kate is still in prison. And why is this important? Because the publication of this book and the liberties it takes with the facts result in Kate getting brought in for further interrogation and torture. Time moves on. The Soviets liberate the prison. The war is over. And Weasley's wife comes up to Kate and is like, "Oh, you should have a copy of this." Kate reads the book. She's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And she goes to the Brits and she's like, "I want to sue Etta Schreiber because she got me hurt more than necessary." She gets dissuaded from that. Meanwhile, Etta, and this is the saddest part to me, Etta writes a letter to Kate. Kate never responds as far as I could tell in the book, and they never communicate again, although it seems like Kate may have kept up with what happened to her. But Etta's like, "Hey, you read my book? It talks about all the great things you did." And Kate's like, "Okay." Anywho. So, my thoughts on this. Again, it was not the story I was expecting. I was expecting more from Etta, but again, she was a follower. What I tried to do was find out more about Kate, and there's very little out there. She spends the rest of her life between France and, I think, London. Don't quote me on that. I got a cold. My head and my memory is not that great. But there wouldn't be much in America. A lot of Goodman's sources seem to come from France, and so now I realize I must learn to read French. I thought this was a fabulous read. I'm so glad my boss told me about it, because now when I go to read Paris Underground, which I hadn't heard of, I will approach it from a different angle. I know that a lot of it is fiction, but I was so impressed by Kate's drive to do something right, to help people against the Nazis, and her ability to make shit happen regardless. It's a shame that she was captured. They don't say too much about he does say talk about Kate's capture. What he doesn't say is who betrayed them, who turned them in, and it really could have been anyone because there were eyes everywhere. Anywho, this is not as long a review as I would have liked. I did make notes on what I wanted to say, but again, I've got a cold and I can only talk for so long. I did a 20-minute video earlier today, and I ended up coughing and sniffling at the very end. If you're interested in women in war, and despite what I said about Etta, it took courage to even participate in the things that she did participate in. But if you're interested in women in war or in World War II, this is highly, highly interesting and relevant, and I think it's a story that needs to be told, and I'm so glad that it was. I thought I had one more thing to say, but it's out of my head. Anywho, I'm going to go drink some more Gatorade. If you've stayed with me this long, as always, happy reading, and thank you for coming with me on my journey. Happy reading.